A Greek god named Poseidon walks out of a river and turns into his human form. He then walks on a bridge and heads to the top of a building to meet his brother Zeus. As they meet, Zeus tells Poseidon to look at the sky and tell him what he sees. Poseidon says there are thunderclouds everywhere.
Thunderclouds.
But Zeus mentions that it's all without lightning because his master bolt has been stolen. Poseidon looks shocked to hear this and asks if his brother thinks he stole it. Before Zeus responds, Poseidon says it's impossible because they're forbidden to steal each other's powers. However, Zeus says their kids aren't and that Poseidon might have sent his son.
But our children aren't.
Poseidon says he hasn't even met his son since he was a baby, but Zeus still mentions that if his brother's son stole the Master Bolt, he'll get him killed. Poseidon sounds angry and warns Zeus against trying something that would cause a huge battle between them. Zeus then mentions that he wants the Master Bolt returned in 14 days by midnight on the summer solstice. He adds that if he doesn't get his Master Bolt back, he'll wage war against Poseidon. The next day, a boy named Percy sits at the bottom of the pool for a few minutes before swimming back to the top. His best friend, Grover, hails him for having such a wonderful ability. He also asks how Percy was able to spend 7 minutes at the bottom of the pool, but the boy says he doesn't know. He adds that he just feels comfortable in the water because it's the only place he can think straight.
There's one place I can think.
Shortly after, the two boys leave for their English class, which is to be taught by a new substitute teacher named Mrs. Dodds. As all the students enter the class, Dodds welcomes them and introduces herself as the new substitute teacher. She also writes a quote from a book on the board and asks the students if they can explain what it means. Even though Percy doesn't raise his hand to answer the question, Dodds seems quite interested in him, and she asks him to explain the quote on the board.
Percy Jackson?
As Percy looks at the board, it turns out that he's dyslexic and he can't read the words she has written. Instead of trying to waste the teacher's time, he just tells her that he doesn't know the answer. After school, Percy heads home to meet his mom, Sally, in the apartment they share with his stepdad, Gabe. He then complains that his dyslexia might be getting worse, and Sally asks why he thinks so. He says he just keeps struggling with words and that it might also be connected to his ADHD.
You know, I thought this school was supposed to make things better.
Sally looks sad about this and tells Percy that even though things might be tough at the moment, she's sure it will get better. Suddenly, Gabe comes to the living room and tells Sally to abandon what she's doing to get him a can of beer. Sally does just as she's told, but Percy doesn't understand why she keeps tolerating Gabe, even though he's a drunk who smells badly. Gabe doesn't like this, and he warns Percy never to speak about him in such a manner.
You show some respect.
After he leaves the boy, Percy still looks disgusted by his stepdad, but he doesn't say anything else. The next day, Percy and his classmates are taken on a school trip to a Greek museum. As he's about to enter the place, he hears a voice telling him to be prepared because everything is about to change. Percy looks confused by this, and as he turns back, he sees Poseidon in human form, though the man eventually disappears. Percy thinks he's only hallucinating.
Everything is about to change, Percy.
So he goes into the museum, where his teacher, Mr. Brunner, tells all the students about the three Greek brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. He mentions that after they ganged up to cut their father into several pieces, they have always fought and hated each other. Brunner then mentions that there was a time when those gods used to come to Earth to mingle with mortals. In some cases, their relationships with mortals led to babies, and Brunner asks Percy if he knows what those babies are called.
Can anyone tell me what they were called?
Percy is initially distracted by the song he's listening to, but he eventually says that they're called demigods. Brunner then asks if he knows the name of any demigod. Percy looks confused because he doesn't know any, but Brunner says that one of them has something in common with him. As Percy wonders what Brunner is talking about, he looks at the wall behind the teacher and sees the Greek words suddenly change to English. He also sees the word Perseus on the wall, and as he remembers that it's the name of a demigod, he tells Brunner. The teacher says he's correct.
Correct.
But as Percy looks relieved, Dodds tells him that she wants to speak to him privately. As they head to a private section of the museum, Dodds suddenly disappears, and Percy wonders where she went. Suddenly, she appears at the top of a high platform, and as Percy wonders how she got there, the woman asks where he kept the master bolt he stole. Percy doesn't understand this, but before he realizes what's going on, Dodds turns into a monster and attacks him. Before he gets killed, though, Brunner and Grover enter the room and shout at the monster to leave Percy. Brunner also warns it to leave, or he'll be forced to tear it to pieces. Just then, the monster drops Percy and escapes through a window. Percy is shocked by this, and as he wonders if what just happened was real, he hears Brunner and Grover calling the monster a fury. Brunner also says he should have known they'd find Percy.
They found him.
But the boy still doesn't understand. Brunner then asks what the monster wanted, and Percy says she talked about a stolen master bolt. Percy immediately defends himself and says he didn't steal anything, but Brunner already knows he's innocent. He then tells Grover to take the boy to a camp where he'll be safe before more monsters start coming for him. Percy doesn't understand anything they're talking about.
What camp? Look, I'm standing right here.
But Brunner gives him a pen and calls it a powerful weapon, which he can use when he's in trouble. Percy thinks it's just a pen, but Brunner ignores him and tells Grover to inform Sally about what happened and ensure he protects the boy. After they leave the museum, Percy asks Grover what's really going on and why Brunner wants his best friend to protect him. Grover says he's Percy's protector and that he has always been close to him to ensure he's safe. Percy doesn't think Grover can protect anyone since he's using crutches.
Maybe you're not seeing what I'm seeing. You have crutches.
But his friend tells him that it doesn't mean anything. After they arrive home, Grover tells Sally that they need to leave immediately, but Gabe says she can't leave because she's still serving his guests. Percy gets pissed and insults the man, but Gabe quickly attacks him. Before he can hurt Percy, Grover knocks Gabe down with his crutches and tells Sally that they need to leave. As they then head to the camp, Percy says he doesn't understand what's happening and that he didn't even steal the master bolt.
I swear, I didn't steal anything.
Sally says she believes him and that they're only taking him to a camp for special people. Percy asks if he's crazy, but Sally says he's not. She also mentions that he's special because of his father. Percy doesn't look interested in this subject because he knows his dad abandoned him, but Sally still tells him about how she met Percy's father. She adds that he never wanted to leave them but was forced to do so. As Percy asks why he had to leave,
Why did he have to go?
a minotaur appears in front of the car and attacks them. Luckily, they survive the crash, but Percy then sees Grover taking off his pants to reveal that he's a half-goat called a satyr. Percy realizes that he doesn't even need the crutches, and Grover says it was all to help him hide his true nature. As they run into the woods, they eventually reach the front of the camp, but Sally can't go through the gate. She then tells Percy that she can't go through because she's not like him. Percy says he won't leave her there, but before they decide what to do, the Minotaur grabs her and crushes her until she suddenly vanishes. Percy is shocked by this, and as he wonders what to do, Grover tells him to use the pen Brunner gave him. As he then taps the pen, it turns into a sword, which he uses to attack the monster. Unfortunately, the monster knocks him off and makes him lose his sword. However, as the monster seems to get weaker, Percy finally gets to kill it before passing out in Grover's arms. When Percy wakes up, he sees himself in an infirmary, and Grover also appears before him and says they're already in camp. He asks if Percy remembers anything that happened the previous night, but the boy says he thinks he had a wild dream. Grover says he wasn't dreaming, but Percy looks sad because it means his mom is gone. Grover says sorry for this and blames himself for not being able to protect Sally. He adds that he's just a junior protector who hasn't gotten his horns yet.
Frankly, I'm just a junior protector.
Percy tells his friend not to blame himself, and as they head out of the infirmary, Grover shows the new boy around the camp. He also tells Percy that he's a demigod. Percy is shocked to hear this, but Grover mentions that he's not really dyslexic. He adds that Percy's brain is only hardwired to understand ancient Greek. Percy then realizes that it's why he could read the Greek words in the museum. Grover also mentions that his ADHD makes him impulsive and good at fighting.
No pitiful loser can defeat a minotaur.
Percy sounds surprised because he always thought he was a freak, but Grover says he's not. As they then walk to the training ground, they see a girl named Annabeth fighting so well. Percy seems to like her, and as he asks Grover who she is, he says she's the daughter of Athena and one of the best fighters in the camp. Shortly after, Grover shows Percy some centaurs, one of whom turns out to be Brunner. Percy is shocked to see that his teacher is half horse, but the man says he's sorry for not revealing his true nature to the boy earlier. He then says there's a place he wants to show Percy. When they get there, Brunner tells Percy that his dad wants him to stay in a reserved cabin.
Your father built this. For you.
As Percy then goes around and wonders who his father is, he sees a trident in the room and realizes that it's Poseidon. Brunner says he's correct and that it's very rare for the three Greek brothers to have kids on Earth. He adds that Percy is now a threat to his father's brothers, who have always hated each other. He also mentions that Gabe's awful smell was able to keep monsters away, but it eventually stopped working. Percy is shocked to hear this, and he realizes that his mom actually tolerated Gabe because she knew his awful smell could protect her son. Percy looks sad because, despite everything his mom sacrificed for him, he still couldn't protect her.
My mother put up with that creep to protect me?
As he walks out, Percy asks why he was brought to camp, and Brunner says he needs to retrieve the Master Bolt and stop a war. Percy says it's not his business, but Brunner mentions that a war between the gods will destroy Earth. Percy then asks what he can do, and Brunner says he'll take the boy to see Zeus in Olympus to convince him that he didn't steal the bolt. Percy asks if they can leave immediately, but Brunner mentions that the boy will have to train first because they're bound to encounter monsters on their trip. Shortly after, Brunner takes Percy to the training ground and introduces him to the other kids at the camp, as he also mentions that Percy will need a team.
And he's gonna need a team!
The camp leader and son of Hermes, Luke, agrees to let the boy join his group. He also sounds quite friendly and welcomes Percy to his team. Following this, Brunner instructs the two available teams to play a game called Capture the Flag. He adds that the first team to capture the other team's flag will win the contest. Interestingly, Annabeth is on the other team, and she quickly heads out with her team to hide their flag. During the contest, Luke tells Percy to stick with him, and the boy does just as he's told. They eventually have to fight against some soldiers from Annabeth's team. But as Luke manages to overpower them, he tells Percy to continue looking for the other team's flag. Percy doesn't know where to look, but as he walks around the woods, he eventually finds the flag with no one guarding it. Percy can't believe his luck, but before he grabs the flag, Annabeth comes out of hiding and says she won't let him take it easily. She adds that she always wins the contest, but Percy just laughs and jokes about how he's a loser. Suddenly, Annabeth strikes him with her sword and injures his hand. Percy looks shocked because he didn't expect her to fight him, but Annabeth continues to attack him. Percy tries his best to stand up to her, but he appears to be no match for her. Everyone sees this, and Grover tells Brunner to call off the fight before she beats him up. Brunner says they have to wait, but Percy continues to receive a beating from Annabeth. After falling flat on the floor, Percy hears Poseidon telling him to go near the water to regain his strength. As he does this, his injuries suddenly start to heal, and everyone looks shocked. When Percy eventually gets up, he fights against Annabeth's soldiers and beats them up. As he also comes up against Annabeth, he overpowers her and renders her powerless by seizing her sword. Instead of hurting her, though, Percy heads over to capture Annabeth's flag, after which his team hails him for securing the win. Later that night, while the kids celebrate their victory, Annabeth approaches Percy and asks if he's feeling like a hero. He says he's not like that, but Annabeth mentions that she knows he'll likely develop a massive ego after the contest. Percy then says he has a feeling that she doesn't like him, but Annabeth says she hasn't decided yet.
Just haven't decided if they're positive or negative yet.
Almost immediately, Hades appears through a fire in the camp and asks to see Percy. Everyone looks scared, but when Hades gets no answer, he starts burning parts of the camp. He then asks for Percy again and tells the boy to bring him the lightning bolt if he wants to see his mom again. Percy is shocked to hear this, and even though Brunner tries to stop him from going to meet Hades, he finally shows himself to the Greek god and asks about his mom. Hades then mentions that Sally isn't dead because he only told the Minotaur to abduct abduct her. He also shows the boy an image of his mom to confirm that she's alive. As Percy sees this, Hades tells the boy to bring him the Master Bolt in exchange for her. After Hades disappears, Percy tells Brunner that he needs to leave immediately, but the man says he'll have nothing to bargain with because he's not the one who stole the Master Bolt. Percy says he can't just leave his mom with Hades.
This is our only chance.
But Brunner suggests sticking to the plan of meeting Zeus first. Later that night, Percy packs his things and tries to sneak out of the camp, but Grover says he'll follow the boy because he's his protector. Percy tries to convince Grover to stay back, but Annabeth also shows up and says she wants to come with him. Percy doesn't want this, but Annabeth says he'll need her experience on his quest because she has won many battles in the past. Percy finally agrees to let them come with him, but as they ask if he knows how to find Hades, he says he hasn't thought of that yet. Annabeth then suggests meeting Luke because he might know how to find Hades in the underworld, since his dad is the only one who frequently goes in and comes out alive.
I think I know someone who might.
When they meet Luke, they ask if he can get any help from his dad to get them to the underworld. Luke says he has never met his dad like everyone else. He adds that gods have always been selfish and they only care about themselves. He then mentions that he once broke into his dad's house and found a pair of flying shoes which can help Percy on his trip. Percy thanks Luke for this, and the boy tells him to check the shoebox for a map. After Percy sees it, Luke mentions that the map leads to the 3 pearls owned by Hades' wife, Persephone.
This is a map to Persephone's pearls.
He adds that it's the only way people can escape the underworld, and that Persephone usually uses them to help her secret guests escape all the time. Grover then asks how they'll use it, and Luke says they just have to step on the pearls and visualize where they want to go. Percy thanks Luke for his help, but before he leaves, the kind boy gives him a shield he might need on his quest. Following this, Percy, Grover, and Annabeth leave for the location of the first pearl in an abandoned restaurant with many statues.
Hello?
As they walk around, Annabeth sees a fountain with golden drachmas, which are used as a currency in the underworld. After she gives Percy some to keep, they decide to split up to find the pearl. While they're at it, a woman comes out of nowhere and begs Annabeth to help her because someone is after her. Annabeth doesn't understand this, but as the woman drags her, she runs with her. Elsewhere, Grover sees a statue of his late uncle and jokes about how real it looks. After a while, though,
Got them all in the same place.
Grover realizes that the statue looks too real, and as he remembers who killed his uncle, he figures out that they're in the lair of a cursed goddess named Medusa. He immediately runs away to warn Percy and Annabeth, but he doesn't find them quickly. He eventually bumps into Percy and tells him that they're in Medusa's lair, so they start looking around for Annabeth. Unfortunately, Annabeth and the old lady bump into Medusa as they try to run out of the old restaurant. Medusa then says it's amazing to have Athena's daughter in her home because she gets bored sometimes with her statues.
We get so lonely here.
Annabeth asks how she knows who she is, and Medusa says she can sense it. She then admires Annabeth's hair and says she used to have such beautiful hair until Athena cursed her. Before Annabeth can defend her mom, Medusa removes her scarf and reveals that she now has snakes on her head. She also takes off her glasses and tells them to look at her.
Come on.
But Annabeth quickly closes her eyes and tells the old lady to do the same thing because looking at Medusa turns people into statues. Despite this, Medusa doesn't back down, and she keeps urging them to open their eyes and look at her. The old lady gets tired of closing her eyes, and as she looks at Medusa, she turns to a statue while holding Annabeth's hand. As Medusa then tries to get Annabeth to open her eyes, Grover and Percy see her. Since they can't look at her,
How are we supposed to fight something we can't look at?
Percy suggests using the metal case of his phone to see her reflection as she tries to force Annabeth to open her eyes. Percy tells his friend to keep them closed. Medusa hears this and realizes that there's another demigod in her lair. As she looks around to find him, Percy quickly runs away and hides near a statue. However, Medusa senses his presence and says she knows he's Poseidon's son.
Son of Poseidon.
Since she doesn't like Poseidon too well, Medusa angrily pushes some statues until one of them falls on Percy and keeps him trapped. Meanwhile, Grover releases Annabeth's hand and tells her that it's fine to now open her eyes so they can help Percy. Medusa eventually grabs Percy and threatens to use her snakes to open his eyes. Before she can do this, though, Annabeth and Grover drive a truck through the lair and hit Medusa. This gets her pissed, and as she stands up, she sees Percy's phone on the floor. As she looks at a reflection of herself, Percy suddenly sneaks behind her and cuts off her head. He then tells his friends to open their eyes because it's now safe. As they see Medusa's head, Annabeth suggests keeping it because her eyes can still turn people into statues even though she's dead. Percy agrees with this, and he wraps it up with Grover's sweater. As he looks around, he sees one of Persephone's pearls on Medusa's jewelry, so he takes it and heads away from the lair with his friends.
1 down, 2 to go.
Shortly after, they check the map and see that the next pearl is in a museum in Nashville. They immediately begin their journey there, but as Grover starts sleeping while driving, they're forced to stop at a motel to rest for the night. After a while, Percy sits inside a pool to think, and Medusa comes over to meet him. As he swims out, he sees her bruised hand and heals it with his powers. They then sit to talk about their parents, and Annabeth mentions that she has never seen Athena before.
I never met her.
Percy wonders why it's always like that with the gods, and Annabeth says it's because of a law made by Zeus to keep them all from having any physical contact with their children. She adds that the rule was actually made after Poseidon tried several times to meet Percy. As they keep talking, Grover calls them inside to see Gabe giving an interview about how Sally's sudden disappearance is Percy's fault. Gabe also accuses Percy of being a bad kid who likely kidnapped his mom. Since they'll soon become targets for cops, Percy says they need to leave immediately.
Great. Now I'm a fugitive.
Grover decides to use the restroom first, but as he removes Medusa's head from inside there, a cleaner sees him from outside the window and screams in shock. Since it won't be long before she calls the cops on them, the kids immediately leave the motel and head to Nashville. When they get to the museum, they see that the pearl is on a crown at the top of Athena's statue.
Hey, it's your mom.
Since there are still tourists around, Percy and the others suggest coming back at night to get the pearl. When the museum finally closes, they leave their hiding spot in the restroom and head out to grab the pearl. Unfortunately, some cleaners are at work, so Annabeth shoots them with tranquilizers to knock them out. As Percy then wonders how he'll get to the top of the statue, he realizes that he can use the flying shoes.
I got this.
So he suggests calling Luke to ask how to use them. After Luke gives Percy the right instructions, the boy uses it to obtain the pearl from the statue. Before they leave, though, the cleaners appear in front of them and seem to be possessed. They then mention that they've been waiting for Percy to bring them the Master Bolt. Percy says he doesn't have it, but this only gets the cleaners pissed, and they transform into a monster with many heads called Hydra. The middle head also appears to spit fire, and as the kids find a place to hide, Percy loses the pearl. He then draws out his sword and cuts off the heads of the monster. However, this only makes things worse, and the monster's heads grow back in twos. As it also gets fiercer, Annabeth tries to distract it so that Percy can get the pearl. Unfortunately, the monster gets close to him, so he's forced to draw out water from the restroom to fight it off. After he gets the pearl and escapes, Grover uses Medusa's head to turn the monster into a statue. Following this, they leave the museum and head to a restaurant where they watch the news and see a report of a single storm cloud growing bigger across the world. Annabeth and Grover believe the gods are getting angry and preparing for war, so they check the next location and find out that they have to go to the Lotus Casino in Las Vegas. When they get there, they're served some lotus flowers, and as they eat them, they seem to forget what they came for and start moving around to have fun. After a while, Percy hears Poseidon's voice telling him to focus on why he came to the casino. Suddenly, Percy remembers why he's there and realizes that the lotus flowers are meant to put people in a trance to keep them from ever leaving. Percy quickly finds his friends and reminds them why they came to the casino. As they remember, the casino officials realize that they are no longer under the influence of the flowers, and they immediately attack the kids. However, Percy and his friends fight them off before finding the last pearl and leaving the casino with a car on display. On their their way out, they see the date on a board and realize that they spent 5 days inside the casino,
Guys, look. Tomorrow's June 21st.
even though it felt like hours. They also figure out that they only have 1 day left before Zeus' deadline passes. Following this, they check the map and discover that the underworld is in Hollywood. When they get there, they find a hole in the sand and go inside, only to meet a man who transports dead people into the underworld. Since they aren't dead yet, the man says he can't take them there, so Grover suggests bribing him. Percy then gives him the golden drachmas they took from Medusa's lair. The man accepts it and takes them to the front of Hades' house. As they enter the place, some hellhounds almost attack them, but Persephone calls them off and brings the kids to meet Hades. The man looks shocked to see that Percy actually came to him, but he still asks for the Master Bolt. Percy says he doesn't have it and that he only came to plead his innocence to get his mom back. Hades sounds pissed, and as he releases Sally from the cage he kept her, he says he'll kill them if he doesn't get the bolt. Percy looks very happy to see his mom, and as they hug each other, a part of Percy's shield opens up to reveal the Master Bolt. Everyone is shocked by this, and Hades picks it up, after which he calls Percy a liar. However, Percy says the shield doesn't belong to him, and Annabeth realizes that Luke tried to set them up to give Hades the Master Bolt. Hades doesn't seem to care, and he tells Persephone to feed them to the hungry souls in the underworld. Just as she opens the gates and sends her hellhounds to chase them into the fire, Persephone tricks Hades and collects the Master Bolt from him. She then strikes him down and stops her hellhounds from hurting Percy and the others. They look shocked and wonder why she's helping them, and she says she doesn't want a war that will leave her imprisoned with Hades forever. She then gives Percy the lightning bolt and tells him to get to Zeus before midnight. However, since they have only 3 pearls, Grover says he'll stay with Persephone. Suddenly, Percy, Sally, and Annabeth leave the underworld with the pearls and are taken to the top of the building, which has a gate to Olympus. Before they go through, Luke shows up and says he can't let Percy take the Master Bolt to Zeus. Percy asks what he wants.
Why would you do that?
And he says he wants Olympus to crumble. He adds that he wants to take control and let the new generation mold the world in a way they like, instead of how their parents have been doing things. Percy says he's not a hero, and this gets him pissed, so he attacks the boy and Annabeth. Unfortunately, he manages to grab the bolt, and Annabeth tries to get it back, but his flying shoes give him an advantage to fly over her. He then tries to shoot them with the bolt, but he misses the target. As he flies away, Percy quickly wears his flying shoes and goes after Luke. They eventually battle it out until they land on top of another building. There, Luke says Percy is too weak and might not even be the son of Poseidon. Before he strikes the boy, though, Percy uses his powers to control the water from all the tanks in the area to attack Luke and nearly kill him. Following this, Luke looks too weak to move, and Percy takes the Master Bolt to meet Annabeth and Sally. As they go through the gate to Olympus and enter an elevator,
Olympus.
Sally is eventually unable to go any further, but she tells Percy and Annabeth to keep going. Meanwhile, Zeus is in a council meeting with some gods and goddesses. As he says the war is inevitable, the clock hits midnight and everyone looks worried. Before he launches an attack on Poseidon, who is also in the room, Percy and Annabeth interrupt the meeting and bring in the Master Bolt. Zeus is shocked to see it, and as Percy hands it over, he says he didn't steal it. He adds that Luke stole it and tried to blame it on him. Zeus commends his efforts in bringing back the Master Bolt, and Percy begs him to help secure the release of Grover from the underworld. Zeus says he'll do that, and as he calls off the war, Poseidon asks his brother if he can at least speak to his son. Zeus says he can, and Poseidon approaches Percy and says sorry for not being there for him. He says he wishes things were different, but that Zeus didn't like the fact that he was getting too close to humans and not taking his responsibilities seriously. He adds that he always tries to guide Percy, and the boy says he has heard his dad a few times. Poseidon then mentions that if Percy ever needs him, he'll always be there.
But if you ever need me, I'll be there for you.
Following this, they shake hands, and Percy leaves for camp with Sally. As they get to the gate, Sally tells Percy that she's happy to see that he has finally found where he belongs. He also says he's happy she's no longer with Gabe, and that he'll come over to see her frequently. After they say their goodbyes, Percy enters the camp and meets Grover, who shows his friend his new horns. They eventually bump into Brunner, and even though he scolds Percy for sneaking out of the school without his permission, he congratulates the boy for completing the quest. He also calls Percy his favorite student and says it's important for him to always follow his instincts. As he says that Percy still needs to continue training like every student, the boy walks away and meets Annabeth to start training with her.